any tracked vehicle. The TAP V was actually a concept Canada was looking for during the Afghanistan mission when we were tasked with protecting a lot of convoy routes, logistical routes. It was a perfect vehicle at the time for protecting those convoys and VIPs, etc. However, it was not ready in time. You can see that the G-Wagon is not an armored vehicle. You might think of it as like a Jeep. It's going to be able to get into places where larger vehicles can't go. Small tracks, forested areas. It's very low profile so that those inside can get right up close and have a look at the lay of the ground, report that back to headquarters, and also see if there's any enemy. Whereas the TAP V is a much larger vehicle, it is completely armored. And it's also developed for possible urban operations. Not only does it have its top hatches, it actually has doors on either side of the vehicle and a door on the reverse. So if you think that if you're in an urban area and your vehicle is stopped or disabled, the troops inside have many options in which to egress the vehicle. So that's the concept behind this vehicle. We actually have a member of our own Ontario regiment here. I'm going to have come out here and introduce our troopers today. So good day, sir. Can you just let us know, introduce yourself?
Private Justin Robinson of the ONTARS.
All right, well, let's give a round here to Private Robinson. And so in the G-Wagon here, you can tell us who the crew is, and these are all serving members of our own Ontario regiment.
So the driver of the G-Wagon here is Corporal Josh Maven. 4 years of service. He has deployed on numerous domestic operations. And the gunner there is Corporal Matt Pierce. 5 years of service, also domestic operations.
So how many crewmen do we currently have in the TAP V?
Currently we have 2, the driver and the crew commander.
Okay. And there's also room in there for infantry to deploy out of it. And also I know that the command version of this vehicle actually even has a toilet at the back. Is that not correct?
That I'm not too sure about.
That's right, you're in private. So who do we have inside the vehicle?
Right now we have the driver is Corporal Spencer Douglas. 4 years of service, also multiple domestic deployments. And the crew commander is Sergeant Buzz Walker, 35 years of service, currently the maintenance warrant with the ONTARS.
35 years. So let's hear it for our own Ontario regiment. Thank you guys for coming out, supporting Aquino Tank Weekend. And if you'd like to learn more about serving in the Canadian Armed Forces, what it's like, if you're local to the Durham region and you're interested in the Ontario Regiment, you can find these vehicles and their booths out there on Worthington Commons. And thank you so much. It's been great to have you here.
Thank you.
All right. Again. So, a lot of the vehicles, the Ontario Regiment, RCAC, go around one more time. And then we're going to get to some larger equipment, some tanks. Going to take a moment to get our guest vehicles off the track before we pull out some pretty significantly heavy armor. Yeah, so just a moment, ladies and gentlemen, as the guest vehicles clear the tank arena. And we'll get to just a couple more vehicles of this segment, and then something a little louder.
So basically, either one of the treads stop and then they move it, or if they're on the move, both of those tracks turn opposite directions.
Genius design.
Yeah, genius.
Okay, the Limber Gunner's just having a small technical issue there, but since they're safely in the middle of the field, we'll just continue on and get some of our guys over there to help them out. Marshall, send out the priest.
M7 Priest.
So what we have here, they look a bit like a tank, but it's not actually a tank. It's based on an M4 Sherman, and maybe it's actually beneficial when the Limber Gunners are still on the field, because this is actually a piece of artillery. So you can see the chassis here, the hull is very similar to our M4 Sherman Bart, but this is an open top vehicle. I think I have some interference here. It's actually a self-propelled howitzer or an artillery piece. So we were looking at the Kangaroo, how they're a modification of a tank to become an armored personnel carrier. Well, those same forces that had to move quick could also move their artillery forward quickly, or, like in the case of the operations in Normandy, could deploy directly to the beaches with their artillery. It's a very little known story, but Canadians actually used the M7B1 Priest. The original M7s. This is an M7B1, the 1944 version. On June 6, 1944, when they landed on Juno Beach. And this vehicle was donated to this museum by funds from a private family foundation, because they had a family connection. Someone in their family actually landed on these on June 6, 1944, and he was later killed in the war and never came home. So museums are not only just full of vehicles and artifacts, but they're full of stories, and stories that we like to tell about service of Canadians and our allies. So this vehicle was donated in November. It's It's an M7B1, so it's a later 1944 variant of the famous Priest. And why is it called a Priest? Well, the British gave it that name because the crew commander's up there in like a pulpit. Even though this is definitely not a clergyman, as he has a 50 caliber machine gun. So the history of this particular vehicle, and once again we have a large display on this in the museum. This vehicle was built in December 1944. We don't know where it would have served with the U.S. Army quite yet. Did it get deployed overseas? Did it go to the Pacific Theater or the European Theater, etc.? It was eventually given to European allies for service in Korea and defense during the Cold War. Was finally retired from service in the 1960s and was recovered by a museum, the 39 to 45 collection in the Netherlands, and was restored to this date by BAMB in the Netherlands, where it was sold to this museum with funds by a private Canadian donor honoring their family. Is that not just an incredible story for a museum? So it has the body of a Sherman, but once again it's a self-propelled artillery. And the reason the Americans lent these to the Canadians is the Canadians were using the Limber, the quad, and the 25-pounder quick gun, which you can imagine if you're hitting a beach on an amphibious invasion, you're not going to be able to deploy that vehicle and that weapon very quickly. So just for about 8 months, the United States lent these vehicles to the Canadians, and they were used. Now it's about honoring memory of someone who landed on Juno Beach. The flag you see here flying is not the flag of Ontario. That's the red ensign. That was Canada's flag up until 1965, when the now famous maple leaf flag that we all know was introduced in Canada. And what's super incredible, and there's another great story, is that we have members from Juno Beach Center in France here at Aquino this weekend. And they took this red ensign and they flew this flag on Juno Beach and then took it down and brought it to this museum as a gift because we're keeping these type of vehicles alive. Is that not an incredible story from Juno Beach Center? And thank you very, very much. They're keeping the history of Canadians in France and the landing of Juno Beach alive every day. And you should really definitely check out their website, support the Juno Beach Center. And if you get an opportunity if you're in France, as a part of a Canadian pilgrimage, you really got to stop at that incredible museum. All right, let's hear from the volunteers of the M7 Priest. very proud of, our peer members, had been working on this vehicle for an incredible 15 years. And now here in Canada, we have a fully operational Mark V Centurion LR.
Them again.
A Centurion main battle tank. This is a UK built vehicle. The Centurion, basically the design for the Centurion started during the Second World War. They were trying to build a heavy tank that could come up against Panther, Tiger, and basically the concept of a main battle tank. And in the post-war period, it became one of the most iconic and battle-tested platforms that was ever built by the United Kingdom. They've been used by most Commonwealth countries, Canada, Australia, Great Britain, obviously, and many other Commonwealth countries had trained on or had Centurions. The Australians used them in the Vietnam conflict. Now, this Centurion is completely operational. As you can see, we've got the turret working, and the early versions of the stab is actually working on this particular vehicle. So, many years of restoration. This was a gate guard at a military base in Quebec for decades before it was given to the Ontario Regiment Museum by the Canadian Armed Forces. And was a start and stop project, like I said, about 15 years. Our volunteers worked on this. And the finishing touches, re-engining the vehicle, and the electrical system was about Now you look at the main weapon, that's a 20-pounder main cannon. Now they were eventually outfitted with the 105. Yes, Malcolm, I understand the turret is very much operational. Okay? Why don't we show it to our visitors? Thank you. So it was actually upgunned by the Canadians to the 105 NATO round. But when this vehicle came back to Canada, it was used as a training vehicle. When they finally decided to retire it and put it on static display as a gate guard, they took out the 105 and put in the old 20-pounder. So it's kind of cool that we actually have the 20-pounder main gun on this vehicle. Also notice that I called it LR. And if you notice on the back of the vehicle, those are an extended range fuel tanks to give this vehicle additional range. Canada actually used these vehicles until 1977, when they were finally replaced by Leopard 1, and the Canadians had the Leopard C1, which was the welded turret early version of the Leopard 1 vehicle. And what do we have here? Well, I see BTED's up there. Is that who I see? Say hi to BTED, guys. But I have Malcolm Towery up top here, operating the turret, of which he's obviously very proud. And I have Chris Bennett. He's our museum maintenance section manager. And both of these guys, it wasn't the whole team, but both of the guys operating this tank right now spent all those years restoring it and turning it into what you see today, a piece of living history. So let's hear it for the Centurion team. It's exceptionally rare to see not only this vehicle run, but to see so incredibly complete and operational. All right, Chris, let's take that out, get around the track one more time.
Yeah. I think they just chose not to.
M113 is such a useful vehicle with so many variants. What you see there is actually not part of the show. We get a little bonus here. That's an M113 engineering vehicle. It's an ARVL. It's a recovery vehicle. So it's not for moving troops around or as a command center, but this particular version that you're seeing, which was not part of the show, is actually an armored recovery vehicle. Very useful here at our museum. You think about when you're having historical vehicle shows, there's always something that could go wrong mechanically with the vehicles. So you get to see a recovery here with the M113 ARVL helping out the limber gunners just to get off the tank arena. Because they're definitely not going to want to be there when we start World of Tanks Battle Royale. Okay, so we have one more vehicle in Meet the Tanks today, and then we're going to get to a very exciting segment. Let's get the Centurion off.
Centurion's just trying to run.
And here with me, you might have remembered the opening ceremonies. Earlier in the day, we had a Gulf War reenactment special here with veterans from the Gulf War. But this vehicle was just recently acquired by the museum. That story is interesting. And the story behind what type of vehicle, a very modern vehicle it is. So I'm actually going to ask Museum President Alan Duffy, as you can see he's wearing the Gulf War uniform. I'll tell you a bit more about this main battle tank.
Everyone, those of you that were here during the Gulf War, this is one of the vehicles that come up quick, and we went over it very quickly. But what I'd like to do is, because as Jeremy said, this is one of our newest acquisitions, and because I'm dressed in this Gulf War attire, we have been looking for this for so long. And it's so funny, you know, when you look for something and you can't find it, then all of a sudden there it is. So while I'm waiting to close the deal on this, we did a trade with a private collector in Vancouver. We get a call from the Canadian Army, and they say there's a T-72 that's on as a monument that's in Montreal. Do you want it? Well, how do you say no to a T-72? So we said, yeah, we want it. And it was used in the East German Army. So it's the one that's over there on display. So we went from having no T-72s to having two. And I don't know, but if you come back next year, we might have that second one running. It's been sitting out for 25, 30 years. But this one here, we showed you the T-54 earlier, T-55. They took that design and they created an upgrade to a T-62. And then after a while, they wanted to do another upgrade. And they had a lot of problems with it. It was called the T-64. Production problems, reliability issues. So then there was a bit of a political thing going on over in Russia, and they came up with, the net result of all that was called a T-72. And you'll notice it's quite different than the other ones. The road wheels, the turret is smaller. It's gone from a 4-man to a 3-man. So there's quite a bit of changes there. But let's talk about Iraq. Iraq purchased the T-72s, and usually they're Republican Guard, they're elite troops, had them, and the others didn't. And it got to the point where the Americans actually had a weapons embargo, and they would punish, if they could, anyone that sold weapons to Iraq. So Russia got around that. They sold it to them in kits, and they called it the Tiger of Babylon. This is not commonly known. The Tiger of Babylon, it was a T-72, and they assembled it from parts in Iraq. That's how they got around some of that. But anyways, we're very happy to have this in our Gulf War collection, and it is a good runner. And let me just say something here. The driver is Rich Bennett. He's our Director of Operations. You wave there. Rich, wait. This is his baby. When we got it, we had all kinds of problems with it. And he knew I wanted to see it here for our Gulf War and to be here for Aquino. So he's busted his chops and he got this thing ready for the show. Up on top, that's Lottie. That's our friend from the Armored Museum in Australia. She came over here and she's been a big help, so let's hear it for her. And that's it for the T-72. I know you want to see what's coming up next, so let's get on with it.
I can't see it. I remember I got bad vision.
All right, thanks again, Al.
Oh. T-62? T-62?
I think it is.
Is it the one with like the router and like drum external like that? Those fuel tanks?
Okay, so that is the end of the Meet the Tank segment. We hope you learned a little bit about these vehicles, a little bit about the organizations that are involved, not just about the Ontario Regiment Museum, but those other organizations, not just here in Canada, but like the Juno Beach Center, even around the world, that make a show like this come together. Once the T-72 gets off the field, there's going to be a few minutes, a break, a pause, as we set up for the next segment, a very exciting, fast-moving, and very loud segment, World of Tanks Battle Royale. Now, in the morning show, I mentioned that the World of Tanks team is giving out 2 special golden
I'm okay.
So we're just getting those winners who came to Aquino Tanks.
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do.
Sitting in the stands just like you. And won the opportunity to get into an MBT today and be involved in one of the most exciting parts of today's afternoon program. So while those vehicles are getting queued up, like I said, there'll just be a few minutes pause, guys, and then we'll be doing World of Tanks Battle Royale. I'll see you in a few minutes.